Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creativity Worth Expressing. Today, I'm with special guest, Amber Gabriel. Amber, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for hosting this podcast. I'm excited.
Can you introduce the audience to some of your works?
My name is Amber Gabriel. I'm a teacher, author, and artist. I write for myself primarily, just as entertainment. I felt for a while that coming home from work and just sitting in front of the TV was draining me more than it was filling me back up. And so that's one of the reasons that I do like to create, because it helps me to be more positive, I guess, when I come home from work. It just gives me something fun to do and focus on. Rather than flipping channels. So a lot of my work is inspired from my dreams. So the first one I wrote was The Warrior Prince of Baruch. And that one, I had the idea of someone who needed a second chance, who had a lot of negative experiences in the past, like PTSD and struggles like that. And my inspiration for that story was actually King David from the Bible, who did some pretty terrible things, but was still man after God's own heart. So I thought, how could somebody who was on the right path then get off of that path and then go back? So that's kind of what I was exploring in my own mind as I wrote the story. So for me, one of the purposes of writing is to work through those thoughts for my own benefit. And just, it allows me to put into words my struggle with a concept or how something could come to be.
When did you feel the spark or the passion to start writing? And when did that spark develop into an interest to become a published author?
I've loved books ever since I can remember my mom reading me stories. And I learned to read at a really young age, and I loved reading. And I would tell myself stories to help myself go to sleep, of course, besides having to write in school. But I have had quite an up and down journey with insomnia and difficulty sleeping and telling myself stories a lot at night. And I never really wrote them down. But when I was trying to figure out why I was having so much trouble sleeping, one of the things that I heard was that, well, if you're thinking of something while you're trying to go to sleep, you should write it down. So that's when I actually started writing down my stories. Later, I found out I had narcolepsy, and I was able to do some things that helped to balance out my eating and sleeping habits. And so now that's way, way better. But I also learned that for fiction, that idea doesn't work, because as soon as you write down a scene that you have in your head, then you have the question, well, what happens next? So that doesn't stop. So that didn't help that at all. I ended up writing a whole book. So.
Currently, I'm reading A Crack in the Rock. It's part of the Edge of the Sword series. And what genre would
Yes.
you say that this is?
Okay, that's really tough too. I'm writing an imaginary world, which generally is considered to be fantasy. However, there are no fantastical creatures or magic in the story. So from joining the Instagram community and working with other writers, there's kind of a label for that called Kingdom Adventure, which is you've made up your own kingdom and you're having adventures, but it's without magic in it. However, of course, none of the Amazon labels are Kingdom Adventure. So then you have to find something else that matches it. So A Crack in the Rock is a lot of times put under women's fiction, and people will refer to it as that. Sometimes I put it in action adventure or romance. So it is a little bit difficult to label.
Can you walk us through a bit of your writing routine and what does it look like?
I like to write on the computer. I know a lot of people like to write longhand, but I like to type it out. I'm not a fan of doing the same thing twice. So I don't want to have to write it on a paper and then retype it word for word, because my second time through, I'd rather do editing and revising. And that's so much easier to do on the computer nowadays, for me anyway. So even if I don't have my computer with me, I usually write on a Google Doc so that I can access it on my phone. So that whether I'm writing in the car or I'm waiting for an appointment at an office, I can get on my phone if I have an idea and add something to a scene. So that for me is very convenient. So along with that, for me, I don't always have a set time that I write. I try to write for an hour or so in the evening when we come home from work. Um, sometimes, if with my narcolepsy, sometimes if I'm operating on a deficit, I might have to sleep uh, for 12 or 14 hours in a day to make up for it. And so if I'm really tired, my husband drives most of our time, so like I'll sleep on the way home. I'll get home, we'll have dinner, I'll fall asleep in the chair, and then I'll get up and I'll go to bed. So sometimes I don't get to writing,
Mhm.
but I'm always thinking about it in my head so that the next time I have an opportunity, I can type it out.
How do you balance the plot, the character development, and the pacing when you're writing your stories?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And it kind of depends on the story itself. If there's a new setting that the characters are encountering, you might have to spend more time on the setting. And I don't like a whole lot of description. When I'm reading other books, if there's paragraphs without any dialogue, I tend to just skip them. So I don't like to do too much description. I like to have a good balance of the characters interacting and some action, and then describing it just as needed as you go along. Um, so mine are pretty equally balanced, I think, between plot and character because it's an adventure story. So there is an adventure or something going on. There's usually, because it's the Edge of the Sword series, some sort of deadly peril that they have to encounter or run from. So it's more like, what are the decisions that this character makes in these situations that show what their personality is or their character is. And then sometimes they'll have thoughts and they'll change their mind or their opinion or something during the story. My earlier books, like The Warrior Prince of Rush, because I was still a new author, probably have more description and more thought in them. And then my newer ones, like A Crack in the Rock, and then currently the last one in the series, Captain of the Sand, have a lot more action and dialogue as I've tightened up my writing.
So, what drew you to this new genre of kingdom adventure?
Well, I've always enjoyed fantasy and things that spark your imagination. Um, my my favorite chapter in the Bible is the one describing the throne of God with all of the seraphim and these crazy, angels with six wings and four heads and eyes all over their bodies and things like that. So I like imagining creatures that we as humans have never encountered. I like reading about them. But the problem for me with writing it, because of my Christian background, is if I put God in the story, then it has to be right. I don't want to put it in a made up religion, because then it would feel like it was anything, something other than Christianity. That just gets weird for me. So even though I can read books that have fake religions in them, I just can't reconcile myself to writing it. So what I have done instead is what in my mind is more of like a parable. So it will tell you the story and through the characters show you, what right and wrong is. And there's very clear, well, there's still very conflicted characters in the books.
Mhm.
I want to show characters that you can root for, that have good morals, that still struggle, but without having to create a fake religion in it. So, or to try and have, because then if you were going to have Christianity in it, you'd have to either have like a portal, like Aslan and the Chronicles of Narnia, and things like that, or have the angels go as missionaries to them. I mean, it's just really super complicated. So that's why I have it be almost more agnostic than anything else, to where it's just you read it and you look at it and you think, I wonder what how this reflects in my life. How would this work, or what is the author trying to say? Just to try to get to people to think without being preachy or telling them this is the way you should think, or this is what is right in this situation, or that kind of thing.
Bouncing off of that, because you have mentioned about this
Mm-hmm.
Christian influence that's in your writing, there's also kind of like in this world that you've made in the Edge of the Sword series, uh, men can have multiple wives. That's part of the world that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that was hard for you to write about with your Christian influence? Why was that an essential part of this world that you're making?
When I wrote The Warrior Prince of Brush, which was the first one that I wrote in there that King Cyrus, who is not the main character in that book, that he had two wives and that they all got along. And then later, after I finished that book, I thought, boy, that was dumb. Why in the world did I say that? Because it's like, that doesn't really work. And then it kept nagging at the back of my mind. It's like, why did you put that in there? Now I have to write a backstory for this. How is that going to work? Can I make a story where you end up with this situation and the reader still likes everybody at the end? So that was my challenge. And I didn't really know if I wanted to tackle it or how I wanted to tackle it. And so I wrote 3 other books in the series before I came back to A Crack in the Rock, which is now chronologically the first book in the series. So before I wrote it, I did a lot of research and a lot of interviews. I have a friend from Cameroon who wrote, like, I told her what I was doing and she got super excited about it because polygamy is legal in Cameroon.
Mhm.
And she wrote down all these notes for me from personal experience and family experience and other things. So I had a whole lot of different scenarios that I could use. I also have missionaries and other friends in places in the Middle East who have to deal with these issues. Like if you convert someone from another religion who does have polygamy and already has 2 wives, what do you do with them? Like the Catholic Church will not allow the second family to, they won't allow, I think it's the man, to take communion. The children can because it wasn't their choice, but some people are excluded because they're in that type of relationship. So it's something that we still have to deal with, and especially as the U.S. opens more to immigration. If we allow families from other countries where the laws are different, what do they do when they come here? So it's still a relevant issue more than you would think. I've also been to lectures by Anna LeBron, who wrote The Polygamist's Daughter. She was a daughter of, and I forget the guy's name, but a cult leader in the United States who had multiple wives. And for her coming out of that, she said it was like one of the worst experiences that you can have as a child, is to be in a family of a polygamous structure. So with all of that, then I wrote, I had kind of in mind where I wanted to go with the story. And I just tried to include all those different scenarios in there to show the woman who was barren, whose husband, had another wife. That came up from a friend of mine who's had a family member with a similar experience in an African country. And then the women who were not happy with their husband, and then they're like, yeah, we can have more, so then we don't have to deal with him. And then the ones for political reasons, like you might find in the Old Testament, where you had to take multiple wives from different countries as you have treaties with them, and the problems that causes. Obviously, it usually causes more problems than it solves. So, at least in family relationships.
So I wanted to now kind of go back to, you were mentioning the research that you did during this writing this
Mm-hmm.
project. What research can you share that you did with let's say your character Sasha? Like, did you do a lot of research? Because I see that she's a healer. I don't want to spoil the book, but she's a healer. But you also give a lot of important, like stuff that I don't know about. When it comes to healing, about like remedies and herbs. What was the research like in writing that part of your character?
Because the world is not magical, so she's not a magical healer. So she heals more with, knowledge of herbs and the body and things like that. She would be someone who was more of an avant-garde type of healer, I guess. Like for a long time in our world, it was considered taboo to perform an autopsy, to just be studying somebody's dead body. That was very disrespectful. So that's why she's able to go to this mountain community where they have a different set of morals and a viewpoint of learning, to where she's able to learn that, where she wouldn't be able to in her own country. So when I was researching for her, I did a lot of research on home remedies and things like that. But I also have doctor friends and experts that I consulted on this. So I have a family practitioner with a lot of experience in different things, a midwife, an OBGYN. So what I recommend to other authors when they're writing things like this, that they have experts that they consult when they are doing things that are outside of their own personal field of knowledge. So I don't necessarily ask beta readers to read an entire book. A lot of people don't have time to do that, but I'll ask, 2 or 3 people in that particular field, hey, can you read this section and see if this sounds workable to you? Or I'll say, like some of my doctor friends ask, so what kind of experience have you had as a general practitioner that were unusual, or pushed your boundaries, or were scary, or are typical for this situation? So they were able to give me lots of ideas and pointers on how someone in a medieval time would do it. It's like if you were out camping in an emergency and you had to do this, what would you do? Because you don't have all of your hospital tools. So that was extremely helpful. I also watched a YouTube video on amputations. So like an entire 45-minute surgery. And I've talked to, I went to our veterans hospital. And this is overlapping a little bit with Captain of the Sand because I have a character there who's an amputee. And so I talked to some veterans at the Veterans Hospital. They let me just go in and hang out for a while and ask them about their experiences and how it felt and what it feels like after surgery and things like that. Talk to combat medics and just as many different people as I could about the types of things that I was portraying in the book.
Wow, so you really keep busy doing your research.
Yes, yes. We also have cattle and dogs and things like that, and so we end up vetting our own animals sometimes. So I have some personal experience with stitches and healing lesions and things like that. So
Now I'm ready for the next chapter in this interview. Are you ready?
sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna have some quick questions I'm gonna ask you, and you just answer however you feel. My first question is, if you could collaborate with another author or another artist, who would you collaborate with? And it could be from any time period.
Currently done one story and soon another one in the world of the supervillain rehabilitation program or project with H.L. Burke, which is a totally different genre than I write, which is superhero fantasy. And it's really, really fun because I have a bad guy there called the Rubber Bandit, which is very punny. And so I have, here it is right here. So that's called the Dosa Files. So that's a collaborative sort of anthology based on her series. And that's been really fun. If I was going to collaborate with somebody else, one of my inspirations was Sarah Woodbury. She was really the first independent, publicly published author that I read. And her journey of how she became a self-published author was one of the things that inspired me to finally publish my own. So it would be really fun to collaborate with her on something. She also writes medieval fantasy based in Wales. She's an expert on the history of Wales.
Okay. My next question is, um, would you rather write in a busy coffee shop or in a quiet library setting?
I like quiet usually, but I can tune out just about anything. So I have worked in coffee shops too. So I don't multitask very well. I focus on just one sentence at a time. So if I'm here typing away, especially if the noise is constant, like a coffee shop business would be pretty noisy, having the same level of noise the whole time, and that doesn't bother me at all. So yeah.
What is the most surprising thing that you have discovered during your research for writing your books?
There have been some pretty interesting facts that have come up. One thing that I learned was that camels are awesome. I love riding camels. I want to go on a extended camel trek sometime. Um, so I went to Doug Baum's farm here in Texas and learned how to ride a camel for some of my research. And they sway side to side, so it's much more comfortable to ride than a horse, which is just to me bouncing up and down. Their milk is the closest mammals to a human's. So in A Crack in the Rock, I have them use camel's milk for one of her children who is colicky. So that was one interesting fact that I learned.
How do you hope your writing impacts readers?
I hope it enables them to empathize with people of different backgrounds and viewpoints, because two people can approach the same problem from different ways. And if you take the time to understand why they're saying what they're saying, then you can try to get them to see why you're saying what you're saying and come to some sort of agreement on how to proceed. I do this all the time with students at school too. It's like two students will be arguing about something or mad at each other, and they'll be like, and you'll ask them, well, what is going on here? It's like, he's saying you were being mean to him. It's like, but I wasn't being mean. It's because of this. And the other person's like, oh, well, I didn't know that. It solves most of the problems if you can just see from other points of view. And that's one of the main things that fiction does for people, is it helps them to understand multiple viewpoints.
Do you have any upcoming projects that we can look forward to?
I'm writing a reader hook right now, or what does they call it? A reader magnet that takes place before A Crack in the Rock. So that will be a novella that I'll give away on BookFunnel or have it free on Amazon and other places to try and get people interested in the series. So that one will be The Lost Bride of Verda, which is one of the neighboring countries to Baruch. So that will be hopefully finished before Christmas. I'm not sure when I'll release it, but we'll see. As I said before, I'm going to have another story in the Dose of Files 2 when that comes out next year. I'm excited about that. It's fun to write a supervillain. I've also been partnering with Quill and Flame, which is a small press that publishes a lot of anthologies and other books. I have some artwork in that, and then I'll be having a short story. I just got my acceptance letter today, so I'll be having a short story in one of their upcoming anthologies. I have artwork in there like this one, which is a lot of submissions open for their anthologies for both art and stories. So this would be good for people of both types of creative minds to be able to submit things and have it published. It's for charity, so there's no reimbursement for that, but it is really fun to help out with it and to be part of a project like that.
Are there any other authors or creatives out there that you suggest we keep an eye on?
if you like my work, then you would like Sarah Woodbury's, because she writes very similar type of medieval action adventure that's very wholesome, that has people that you like to root for. I also enjoy H.L. Burke's work with the super villains and superheroes, things like that. And then if you enjoy clean fiction, I'm also the biblical fiction editor for Clean Fiction Magazine. And Clean Fiction Magazine had a record number of reviews in it this last quarter. They published, I think, 150 something reviews. So it's a really great resource for people wanting to support indie authors to check that out and read their reviews and get ideas for things to follow. And Closed Door Romance is also another account that I follow that has a whole lot of great indie books that they promote on there.
My last question is, why is creativity worth expressing for you?
Creativity is important to express, even if it's just for your own self. It doesn't have to be published, but it exercises your mental and emotional flexibility the same way that you would exercise your physical body. You need to exercise all parts of your being. And so it allows you to kind of process and reflect life as you're taking it all in. If you're able to put it back out, if you never go through that process, you don't grow as much as a person. You don't have that metacognition and thinking about your thinking. And so it's very important to express yourself and to be creative, even if you don't publish it for other people. It's an important process for yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Amber. And it's been an honor having you on Creativity Worth Expressing.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.